Oh, shooting a reaction video on the Unified Namespace, going over some LinkedIn posts about what actually is digital transformation, touch on SAP's claims that UNS isn't scalable, and a couple other things. Take 0. This video is going to take the form of, it's going to be long form for sure, but it'll sound like a podcast, but I'm actually going to be sharing my screen most of the time. So a bunch of people reached out to me. Corso Systems came out with another blog post on the Unified Namespace. I have not read it yet at all, other than I have it pulled up on my browser. I have not read anything in it. I'm going to react to it live. And then we're going to come over, we're going to touch on some posts on LinkedIn. But I want to talk about something real quick. So we did a whiteboard video, OEE for Industry 4.0. You know, I was in Slovenia last week on site with a client. I generally don't travel that much. You know, I do architecture, but I don't work in projects anymore. But I do approve architectures, and the engineers who work at Intellic specifically, and our other integrator partners like GIS and Skellig, and you know, I consult for engineers who do digital transformation. One of the challenges that I keep trying to figure out a way to communicate this, like educate it, is one of the biggest challenges in digital transformation for legacy organizations is that they don't really understand what digital transformation is. Right. And, you know, I talk about it all the time in our content. You know, digital transformation is a shift in mindset in the way that you operate your business. One of the things that I'm concerned about in our industry is people's motivations. You know, vendors like, I'm going to react to this Corso video here, or this Corso blog post. I did 2 reaction videos on Corso postings last week. In both of those videos, I did a professional courtesy and sent a message to the leadership at Corso Systems, and with no reply. So both videos, I offered to try to kind of correct some of the things that they're putting in their blog posts that are in fact wrong. Hopefully this one is more more correct. You know, this is a perfect example right here. What Corso is doing here, this is a perfect example of one of the challenges we face in the industry. Well, while I applaud their content and I have respect for Corso Systems, the things that they are saying that are a unified namespace are not a unified namespace. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, hopefully this blog post today is more accurate, but that is not, and I'm gonna try and do a lesson that drives home this point. Because if what you do is you read that Unified Namespace 101 blog post from last week, and you were to go ahead and just implement your digital transformation initiative off that blog post, you will create technical debt. Full stop. That's what you will do. You will have to undo it because you are trying to achieve the holy grail of manufacturing, which we've talked about a million times. That's what digital transformation is. Automating business decisions. Okay. And I'm going to talk about one of those specific use cases today, which is the machine learning, ML, AI, predictive analytics, whatever you want to call it. Unified Namespace plays a huge role in being able to achieve your machine learning goals. So this customer I was on site with in Slovenia last week, they had already started a machine learning initiative to do predictive analytics. They invested a bunch of dollars. They had tried to predict failures, and their consultant architect, you know, said, "Hey, it didn't go well. Right? We just couldn't achieve it." And the answer was because they didn't have the infrastructure to be able to, that is, they had clear data that was normalized, contextualized, where they could turn an ML algorithm loose and look for patterns in that data, in that time series data. Look for similarities. Okay, whether you're running a linear regression that's trying to look for every value X, what's the likely outcome Y with a percentage likelihood. Hey, I'm 98% that for this value X, we're going to get this outcome Y. Okay, that's linear regression. You have to have the data you need in the format you need it, in the structure you need it, and normalized against the other data points that you want to compare it with for every value X, every value Y. They said, hey, we tried to do this ML initiative and it failed. Now, to me, it was obvious that if I had been in the room and they said, hey, let's do predictive analytics, and I would have said, well, you don't have the infrastructure to do that. You're literally burning your money. You're wasting it. You're putting the cart before the horse. There's a sequence. Digital transformation happens in a sequence. And it's very important you make the right decisions up front. Okay? We talk about this error vector. We draw an error vector. And what we're hoping is that vector encompasses all the phases of our digital transformation journey. One of the things that I've realized in my career is that people's motivations are important. There's a really common question I get from, integrator partners or vendors when they reach out, and we get, hundreds, thousands of inquiries. My LinkedIn, like if you were to just leave my LinkedIn open all day long and keep it up in a browser, by the end of the day, there would be just an unlimited number of chats open from new messages that were sent to me. Okay, I mean, I have a team that answers my LinkedIn. There's that many messages that come in, and I'm not even talking about the bullshit ones where people are trying to sell stuff to me. I'm talking about people who want real partnerships. They want me to review their product, or they want me to advocate. They want me to advocate for their product, whatever. When I have conversations with those people, the first thing I'm trying to ascertain is what their motivation is. Why are they in this industry? Why is it? What is the bigger goal? Other than I have to make money to stay in business, what are you trying to achieve? Like, I believe in principled capitalism. I believe in the importance of putting the client first. Like, it's my job to be an advocate for the client. Okay, the client is not a means to an end. The client is not I'm the predator and they're the prey. The client is someone I'm going to help. I was talking about this in our organization. I was having a meeting with, we were working with a client that was really difficult. The people that were all there were good people, but it was the kind of project that just the engineers hated, and I'm not really involved. I'm not involved in Intellic at all. But when, there's a problem, say the engineers are unhappy on a project or whatever, and we want to fire the client. Maybe the amount of effort going in is, or we're going to have high turnover if we don't get engineers off the project or whatever. And I had a meeting with our engineering staff. This is maybe, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And one of the questions that I asked the team was, can we help these guys? Like, do they need our help? Like, are we the team who can help them? And they said yes. And I said, is there another team out there right now who could help them? And the answer was no. And they were working with a couple of other, enormous vendors, enter in, the big, huge consultancy firms. And so what I said was, what would happen if we didn't support this client? Let's say we decided, when we get to the end of this purchase order, we're not going to work with them anymore. What would the implications be? Who would get hurt the most? And they said their frontline worker would, because they'd be less competitive. They'd end up doing layoffs shortly. And I said, our mindset is we're working for them. We're working to save their jobs, the frontline workers' job. We're not working for, this director who's fighting with that director. We're not working for them. We're working for the people on the plant floor. There was, a few years ago, this company reached out to us. They didn't have any money, or they had very little money. They had like maybe $5,000. I mean, when I say very little money. and they needed us to go on site, and they were in a tough bind. And they needed us to go on site and evaluate, a solution they had in place that some other integrator had done, and they wanted us to fix it, and they just didn't have the money to fix it. Okay, and I was talking to one of the architects who had done the initial call, and I said, "Can we help these people?" And he said, "Yes." The whole team's there. They're like, "What do we do here? We're going to have to do this essentially pro bono." And I said, do they need our help? Yes. I turned to my chief financial officer and I said, can we afford to help them? Yes, we have the money to do it. We can eat it. All right, let's do it. I said to the architect, do you think we should do it? Yes, we do. Yes, I do. This is these guys are the prototype. This is who we're trying to help. Let's do it. I'm looking for that. You'll hear me talk big about Jeff Knepper, right? I talk about Jeff Knepper all the time. And, why do I love Jeff Knepper he was at Canary and now he's with Flow and they're building the Unified Analytics framework. And, why do I love Jeff? Well, the answer is Jeff isn't in this business to get rich. Like, he's not in this business to get rich. Jeff is in this business because he wants an opportunity to take a much bigger message to the whole world. And that it's a message of salvation. Okay, he has a much bigger mission. Okay, he wants to have a positive impact on the world. He doesn't see the world as a zero-sum game. He believes you can create markets. He believes that goodness and kindness and positive impact comes in many forms. That's why I love Jeff. That's why I love so many members of our community. Not everyone is like that. You have the right to just be a pure capitalist who, dog eat dog world, and you want to, you're in it to make money. There's a vendor that we just terminated a partnership with after many years because it became very obvious in that exchange with that vendor, and I'm going to talk about this in another video, that vendor doesn't give a shit about the customer. And it does not care about the client at all in any way, shape, or form. The leadership of that organization, their top priority is revenue and license sales. Okay. Everyone's got to stay in business to make a difference, but you don't have to sell your soul to be in this industry. It's why I'm so hard on Rockwell Automation. It's why I'm hard on the big boys. I have a responsibility to be hard because I can afford to be. Nobody can hurt me financially. Like, no one can threaten me financially. We don't enter into vendor agreements. Therefore, our vendor partners can't take anything away from me. We don't take leads from our vendor partners. Therefore, they can't threaten to take those leads away in order to control what I say. Okay. And I was talking to the client that I was in Sylvania with last week, and we had lunch in the capital city with some other people, not just the client, but some other people we're going to partner with in Eastern Europe. And, I talked about, they were thanking me for everything that we do. And one of the guys was saying, I listen to your videos every day driving to work, every single day. Some of your videos I've listened to 100 times, And, I said, I really appreciate that. I do, and I hope the community understands the price we pay as an organization, 4.0 Solutions pays as an organization, to tell the truth. We pay a huge price, but we take that burden on with open arms. Okay. And the reason I say that is people's motivations matter. Organizations' motivations matter. They matter. I'm going to be shooting a video later today. I got to shoot like 4 videos. I'm going to be shooting a video later that is, be wary of anyone who ever suggests silencing someone else or deplatforming someone else. So not necessarily they're trying to silence you or deplatform you, but they're suggesting they use their authority, the influence that they have, to silence or deplatform someone else. every time I call someone out by name publicly, I always offer them an opportunity to come onto our podcast and defend themselves. Always. I also don't pick fights with people who can't defend themselves. And there have been many people who have, come at us over the years when, I would engage with them initially. And then once I realized maybe they weren't all there, or, maybe they had a drinking problem or whatever it was, and I would just back off. I'm only going to have fair fights. One of the fights I'm trying to pick right now is with SAP. We're going to talk about this here at the end. But one of the fights I'm going to try and pick is with SAP. SAP is trying to go to the plant floor. They got a bunch of solutions they're trying to go to the plant floor with. They're not able to get them sold. They're frustrated. And now what they're trying to do is, they're literally telling clients who maybe we're competing against them, or say a vendor, an integrator partner is like doing a proposal. They're proposing unified namespace. SAP is coming in and saying that doesn't scale. So then the integrator partner comes to me and says, hey, can you give me ammunition to defend against this? And I say, sure. And so I wrote a post that covers that, and I'm going to shoot a private video for mastermind members that'll explain how UNS scales. I'm going to talk about how UNS scales as I read through this Corso blog post. But what I've done is I've said, somebody from SAP, I want you to come on the podcast and let's have a talk. If I'm going to take a shot at SAP, I'm going to have them come on here. And by the way, with Corso, I don't even know if I'll take a shot. Maybe they corrected everything in this blog post. But if Corso wants to come on, the invitation is open. What I would say is be wary of anyone who's talking about unified namespace who was not trained by us through IIoT.University or 4.0 solutions. If you're not trained on unified namespace by us, either directly or indirectly, like either by us or by someone we've already trained, then you don't know what unified namespace is. You may know what it is conceptually, but there's no way you're taking it cradle to the grave. No way. There are people who've been watching our videos for 3 years that when I meet them, or 5 years, we've been doing this since 2018, that when they will go, I totally get UNS. I've done it. I built UNS, say asset level. I built it site level. I've got a couple of plants connected together, but I don't understand how that part works. And it takes me 4 minutes to go, oh, this is how you handle transactions. Oh, here's how you handle historical data. Oh, here's how you handle CAD files. And it takes 4 minutes to answer the question. And even they didn't understand how that worked. So I've been doing UNS since 2005. The first unified namespace was built in 2005. This is a very important architecture for manufacturers to remain competitive in a digital economy. And again, the goal is digital supply chain, and we're going to talk within that context today. If you don't get it right up front, semantic hierarchy right up front, you're fucked. I mean, you're just creating technical debt you'll have to undo. All right, with that, let's go ahead and get into this, and then I'll answer a couple of... I know it's going to be long form. I apologize. It might take an hour and a half. Who knows? But, my team wants me to always keep these videos in 10-minute chunks and, hey, Walker, do it on the whiteboard. People like that better. And I do these types of videos here at my desk because I have not prepared for this at all. I've opened 4 the blog post and 3 LinkedIn posts, and I'm just going to talk and just riff. So, all right, here we go. All right, so this is the latest blog post. They don't put dates on them, so but we'll include the link if you want to read it yourself. We'll include the link in the post in the description. So, how to implement a unified namespace with Ignition? Okay, we've done plenty of talking about the unified namespace concept. It's an architecture, not a concept. We've posed the question asking if Ignition is a unified namespace. And we've talked at length about how MQTT and Spark-Plug-B play a pivotal role in implementing a unified namespace. All right, Ignition is a unified namespace. If you use the Ignition as an IoT platform for every single node in your ecosystem, okay, then Ignition can be your unified namespace. But I don't even know. I don't know of any example where all the nodes in the ecosystem are solutions built inside of Ignition. I don't know of any of that. So rarely, Ignition can be a unified namespace, but it'd be rare that Ignition was the actual unified namespace, and I've stressed this a million times. All right. While many other online resources discuss unified namespace, they tend to focus on topics such as how unified namespace and the ISA 95 standard might work together. What none of them do, and what we are going to do in this post, is show you how to implement a unified namespace. In this example, we'll also use the same digital manufacturing technology we use at Corso Systems every day to help manufacturing companies streamline their operations and increase revenue and profits. All right. The reason you don't see how to implement a unified namespace across an organization in a blog post is because it is not possible to teach someone how to implement a unified namespace in a blog post. It is simply impossible. Anybody who's a member of our mastermind program, which is 200 people plus another 600 or something in mentorship, you have people who have been going through mastermind for 3 years. Every month, 4-hour sessions. Okay, we do a 4-hour session. If you were to go to IIoT.University, and in fact, let me do that. Let me switch over here. And let me go to IIoT.University. Let me log in. And let me go to Mastermind. And let me show you. All right. Okay. So this is actually inside of the digital Mastermind program. Okay. I'm just going to scroll through. This is 3 years. See how these are all the videos on unified namespace and digital transformation. And at the centerpiece of digital transformation is unified namespace. Okay. So it is the architecture upon which you solve business problems. Okay. All right. You can't put all of this in, you can't put all of this in one blog post. Okay. From functional to leadership, it's literally not possible to teach how unified namespace in a blog post. It's not possible. You can teach how to do a specific solution, but you can't teach unified namespace in a blog post. It's simply not possible. And to represent that you could is irresponsible. It's irresponsible. Okay. And yes, you can replace any of the components in our examples architectures with anything else. So Allen Bradley PLCs, Siemens PLCs, B&R, Schneider Electric, any other brands. You could also include more complex systems like generating a list of product codes from an ERP system to send data to an MES system, for example. The HiveMQ broker in our example can be another cloud-based broker, a Chariot broker from CirrusLink, or even a Mosquito broker. Essentially, the components in our example are the ones we've chosen from the options we like and have used in the past. Our unified namespace architecture. Following the lead of the popular cloud-based MQTT broker HiveMQ, we will be implementing an architecture like one in the diagram below, but with fewer nodes. Okay? We went over this in the last one. We're going to start with our Opto22 Groove Rio device to act as a gateway edge of network node, and we're going to tie in a temperature sensor. Next, we will connect an Allen Bradley PLC to Ignition to act as a PLC device, as well as a separate Modbus device. We will connect Ignition to the MQTT broker to act as our SCADA host, and finally, we'll connect to Clarify to represent our historian and analytics nodes. We're choosing HiveMQ to be our MQTT broker since we like their offering and it works well with all the above technology. All right, so what he's doing, or whoever's writing this, what they're doing is they're taking a direct edge of network node. So they're going to take a Sparkplug-B namespace directly from the Groove Rio, and they're going to publish that directly to the broker. They're going to take an Allen Bradley PLC, and they're going to go through Ignition, OPC. They're going to go native SIP into Ignition, and then Ignition, they'll use a transmission module to transmit Ignition or Allen Bradley tags to the broker, and then they'll use Ignition as a SCADA system to subscribe back from the broker. And then I think he said Modbus. and I don't know if they're using Allen Bradley or what are they doing? They're doing as well as, and they'll have a separate Modbus device. So then they'll have Ignition talking to the Modbus device, and then they will convert that to, you know, Ignition tags and MQTT topics, transmit it to the broker, and then the SCADA system will consume. Then they're using clarify.io, and then they're also using Clarify as their analytics layer. Okay, if that's their architecture, then what you have here is a very simple namespace for process control and analytics, and that is not a unified namespace. It is a UNS for a function, but it is not a UNS for an organization. Okay, it's not a enterprise unified namespace. Okay, all right. Allen Bradley doesn't currently support MQTT directly. It actually does, but only within the Allen Bradley ecosystem. So they have eNet devices that support MQTT natively, but Rockwell Automation has made the choice to not allow you to use MQTT from their hardware out, and that is almost certainly a function of their relationship with the OPC Foundation. Though you can convert the data with an MQTT gateway, hardware, software, much like having to use ProSoft modules to support Modbus data with Allen Bradley. So we're going to connect our Allen Bradley PLC to Ignition, and then we'll use Cirrus Leak transmission to send the data to HiveMQ, and other systems can access the data through the unified namespace. If this encompassed, say, so this is a very small example. This is a functional example of collecting process data. This is an OT example, okay? A purely OT example. Since we are using the Cirrus Link transmission module on the Ignition gateway for PLC, we will also use it to connect to the Clarify MQTT broker. This will simplify the architecture for our example. If you wanted a complete unified namespace through this example, you could just as easily set up the enterprise bridge functionality of HiveMQ to connect the brokers directly together. However, that adds an additional layer of complexity to the system for our example here and would require a much longer post to explain properly. Often, perfect is the enemy of good. So for the sake of brevity, we'll implement a functional example to get started and worry about making an ideal version later. The brains of the operation, configuring HiveMQ, blah, blah, blah. So this is just the steps of setting up your HiveMQ broker. So we've got HiveMQ set up. Connect the Groove Rio to HiveMQ using SparkPlug-B. Then we're going to connect Allen Bradley to and the Modbus PLCs directly to Ignition. Good. Connect Ignition to HiveMQ using SparkPlug-B. Good. Configure Engine. So what Engine does is it takes a topical namespace from an MQTT broker and it converts that topical namespace into tags inside of Ignition. So you're going to put the MQTT Engine module in. You'll go to your gateway. Okay, blah, blah, blah. This is all the setup stuff. All right. Connect Ignition to HiveMQ with the Cirrus Link MQTT transmission module. What transmission is the exact opposite of Engine, where Engine is consuming from a broker and turns into tags. Transmission takes Ignition tags and turns them into topics and transmits them to a broker. One of the big challenges, and that's kind of frustrating, is that's always SparkPlug-B. So Ignition can consume non-SparkPlug-B payloads, Engine can, and convert them. But whenever you're using transmission, you're always publishing via SparkPlug-B, and that's the reason why is because what they do is they package Ignition tags as metrics in the transmission module. So in that JSON, if you guys are in Mastermind or you did the ChatGPT workshop, you saw how we we parsed a protobuf payload and basically showed what a metric looks like. And I did it in the last blog post reaction. All right, MQTT Engine allows you to send and receive from the broker, creates the tags, blah, blah, blah. So this is just all the setup stuff. Good. Connect Ignition to Clarify using SparkPlug-B and the Cirrus Link transmission module. Great. All right, unify the namespace. So now we've connected all the pieces, which is HiveMQ. For this example, next we'll create tags on the various sizes and build our namespace. Unify. You're actually building a namespace, not a unified namespace. Unify the unified namespace. Now that everything in our architecture is connected, we can start getting data from wherever it originates. For this example, we will keep the tag list simple so we can teach the concepts. Scaling this up is just a matter of applying some thought to your naming convention. It's not a naming convention. It's a semantic hierarchy. The naming convention is not important at all in any way, shape, or form. Pick any naming convention you want. Semantic hierarchy matters. I'll show you in a minute why. Okay. They got to stop doing this naming convention thing. Even John Forboard, Corso posted their previous blog post to LinkedIn, and John Forboard, one of the members of the community, even tried to tell him, hey, listen, this blog post is not very good. Moreover, you're talking about naming convention, which is like anyone who goes to this blog post. Let's say they go to any of these blog posts. By getting these details wrong, let's say they think they're getting unified namespace architecture, which is what you see all over the world, and then they go to these blog posts, they will make fundamental design decisions that will create technical debt if they try to scale to their enterprise. Okay, and I'll explain here in a minute. We want the unified namespace for these tags to follow this structure. Controls, PLCs, PLC 101, 102, 103. Okay, so what they're doing here is they are grouping PLCs under their devices. So this is a device-centric namespace. So there is no context to where that PLC is. So if I look at this, controls, PLCs, PLC 101, I have no idea. If I look at the namespace, one of the important things about a unified namespace is semantic hierarchy. Okay, now let's say what I had was above controls, I have, say, ISA 95 that gets me to my assets. So let's say I've got a production line, ISA 95 that gets me to my assets. If there was a production line above this, you could just put edge here, get rid of edge and PLCs. You'd put edge, and then you just have PLC 101, 102, 103. Assuming PLC 101, 102, and 103 are inside of your production line. Moreover, let's say this is raw. Let's say that this is the part of the namespace that is the raw part of the namespace. So in a unified namespace, you will have just raw, a raw hierarchy with, say I've got a directory called edge. It's in the root node, and I've literally got every single PLC from the edge in that folder. Okay, literally every single PLC, hundreds. And then what I've got is my semantic hierarchy, which helps me get to the thing that I need to look at. Okay, enterprise site area line cell. When I get to my line and I create my edge directory that gets me to my PLCs, what I'm doing is I can create an edge namespace that references the raw PLC inside of our raw edge namespace. So maybe they're creating that here, but it doesn't look like that's actually what they're doing. All right, note, before you ask, yes, we know about ISA 95. So obviously a lot of people are asking them about ISA 95. If you want to understand our methodology for naming conventions for the unified namespace itself, if you are not using semantic hierarchy, you are not building a unified namespace. Let me say it again. If you are not using a semantic hierarchy, and what is semantic hierarchy? The semantics of the structure means something. So just by, I can navigate up and down the structure of our namespace to get to the thing I know I need to see. I don't need to, there's not a deterministic browse where I have to know specifically where something is in order for me to get to it. In this case, I need to know specifically where PLC 103 is related, is located. As opposed to, I want to see the PLC for line 1, all I have to do is go enterprise site. I only have to know the site and the area that production line is in. Then I can get to the line and I know there will be a namespace called edge that contains the PLC. That's what a semantic hierarchy is, okay? So, but what they're saying is before you ask about ISA 95, by the way, you don't have to use ISA 95, but you do need a semantic hierarchy. And it has to make sense, and it has to be something you can teach to people. Please check out our post using ISA 95, Sparkplug-B, and unified namespaces together. When people are looking for data in the system at the UNS level, when people are looking for the data at the, well, there's no, UNS isn't a level. It is a architecture. Or are trying to integrate with the UNS, they will likely look at PLC code, electrical drawings, network diagrams, or an Excel sheet that lists out devices with their data points. That is absolutely not true. This is not true. Even in their last, real quick, even in their last blog post, okay, in their last blog post, what they said was the value of unified namespace is that there's an abstraction layer between domain expertise and non-domain expertise, okay? So that is, a unified namespace gives you the ability to work with data that you don't have domain expertise on. If I'm going to be looking at PLC code, electrical drawings, network diagrams, or Excel spreadsheets that list out devices with data points, I must have domain expertise on that data. Only a controls engineer is going to be able to look at a control theory Excel spreadsheet and be able to ascertain which data points they need to use. And even a non-technical person can go to a semantic hierarchy and go, my enterprise, I can go to my location, I can go to the area I work in, I can go to the production line I'm in, and what I really want is the temperature on that tank, and I want the level on that reservoir. Tank 1, oh, there's the level. Reservoir, oh, there's the, or tank 1, there's the temperature. Reservoir, there's the level. That's semantic hierarchy. You're not getting that from PLC code, electrical drawings, or data points. This is super, super important distinction here, okay? They will most likely not be looking at enterprise, site, area, line, equipment layout. For this reason, and having gone through this process on many projects implementing unified namespaces over the years, we prefer to break down the data inside the unified namespace in a way that most people will find useful. No, maybe your team will find useful, but the organization isn't going to find that useful, okay? Yes, this means some folks will need to do a little more work to map the data to some of the domain-specific names. It literally contradicts the last blog post. However, it will save everyone from doing a lot more work to get the system off the ground in the first place. Yeah, I'm going to say this. Ignore, I mean, come on. Let me say this. I need to find some nice things to say about this, okay? Because I don't want to bash it. You know, my goal here is not to bash it. My goal is if somebody reads this, they will have a resource that will put this in its proper context as it relates to unified namespace, which we talk about all the time. Let me say this. If you have been, if you're building a unified namespace with the way it's described here in this blog, you are not building unified namespaces. What you are trying to do is hijack the term unified namespace because of the you know, how popular the term has become. And if you look at, say, Google Analytics and you look at the number of searches for unified namespace, you are literally trying, for SEO purposes, you are trying to piggyback on the value, because this is not unified namespace. What you are describing here is not unified namespace. It isn't. I don't know what to tell you. Please come on our podcast and let's clarify. Okay. Otherwise, stop doing this. You're going to confuse people. All right. You may feel differently, and that's totally okay. You can absolutely use things like the Paris or Schultz methods. So I don't know what the Paris or Schultz methods, but I suspect it's probably something I taught them, since both Matt Paris and Dave Schultz are members of our IIoT.University community. And add a long identifier with backslashes or colons to get your ISA 95 equipment model in your namespace. Actually, I'm the one who recommended they do that. We will happily support projects with that approach as well. Digital transformation is not a project, it's a strategy. We simply feel it saves a lot of headaches in the long run to map data based on all of the documentation around the system, rather than looking at one standard in isolation. No, documentation is a function of the unified namespace. So rather than, by using the documentation, there's a master data model that you use to organize the business. And why do we use a master data model to organize the business? For tax reasons, for income, for revenue and cost reasons. When you go to an ERP system, when you go to the general ledger, the business is organized with a semantic hierarchy. Okay? The business is organized into units. It is organized into assets. It is organized into cost centers. It is organized into locations. There is a semantic hierarchy in every single organization. What you're doing is you're going very control-centric, OT-centric, very process-centric, and then trying to call that unified namespace. What I would say is this is the positive element. Let me try to be positive here for a minute. If you were going to build a unified namespace on an asset, so just on an asset, So that is the asset doesn't have to fit into any other part of the business. Okay? You could get away with doing this. You could call this an asset unified namespace with SCADA, historian, and analytics on it. Okay? With local brokers. You could do that. This is not a unified namespace for a business. This is not how you do unified namespace within digital transformation. Okay? All right. Okay, so it's just more stepping through, blah, blah, blah. Let me see here. Sending data to clarify. So what I would say is this. For those of you who've asked me, how can I use this blog post? You can use this blog if you ignore this section here. So just ignore this piece, okay? Ignore this section here. And let's say you wanted to build, asset level unified namespace, not even line level, just purely asset level. You could do it this way. And here's why. Let's say that there is no semantic hierarchy, okay? The full namespace that gets created this way is the asset. So it's either a production cell or it is a line that fits inside of your master data model. All you would have to do is transmit that asset level namespace to a higher level using, whether you're doing Sparkplug B or whether you're using vanilla MQTT, and you could transmit it into the location in the semantic hierarchy where it would work. However, if you go outside of the asset and you move to a higher level and you structure your namespace this way, you will lose, for each level you move up, you're going to lose the semantic hierarchy going down. So let's say you made this the area level namespace, you would never have line level context and you wouldn't have cell level context. You would be able to take the area and publish it into a semantic hierarchy, but then what you would have is no semantic structure from the area level below, okay? So you could do this on the asset and either send it to a cell or a line and get away with it. But you're not going to get, within the context of the business, you're not going to get away with it anywhere else. All right, let me explain why, okay? Digital transformation, let's talk about the digital transformation piece first. What is digital transformation and why companies are even doing it, okay? Companies aren't doing it to create SCADA systems. They're doing it to become smart companies. And the goal is to plug into a digital supply chain, okay? What they're doing right there is what they're proposing in this blog post, which, by the way, everything that they put in there about, the ignition connections and how to create your tags, I wouldn't be using the Clarify broker, by the way. I would have Clarify be consuming from the HiveMQ broker. So instead of going broker to broker, which is what they're doing, what I would do is just have Clarify consume from the HiveMQ broker. Don't use the Clarify broker at all, okay? That's what I would do. There's nothing in there about function, okay? Okay, there's nothing in there about functional namespaces of the business, so I don't know how they structure that, but they don't mention it in any way, shape, or form, so I don't know how they're doing that. But what they are doing, in fact, is this piece. Okay, they are connecting, collecting, storing, analyzing, and visualizing data for an asset, or a couple of assets, or a couple of production lines, okay? If they go above the asset level, okay, so let's say they take that architecture that they have right there and they go above the asset level, then you will not be able to find patterns, predict, report, or solve. You'll be able to find patterns with the data on that asset, but you will not be able to take, let's say, tanks, reservoirs, flow control valves, process variables, ambient temperatures from other systems across many assets that are the same, okay, that are the same asset, and be able to find patterns by using the data across all of them. For example, facial recognition on our phone. The model isn't trained on my iPhone. My iPhone and everyone else's my iPhone is the data across all those iPhones are being shared in the exact same structure, the semantic hierarchy, okay? If you use this architecture that they're talking about here, you can't do the find patterns, predict, report, and solve. You can't take the data points, the X's and the Y's from various assets natively from the architecture and just learn from them. because they're not being stored in the same structure, which is why the semantic hierarchy matters. It's a very siloed solution that's there. Now, all the technical stuff that they put in there in terms of how to connect the pieces together all seems right, okay? Unified Namespace is an architecture used to create a digital company to serve two primary goals. Number one, become smart. Number two, plug into a digital supply chain. Okay, so step one is becoming a smart company. Step two is plugging into the digital supply chain. And you have to have a unified namespace for your business that is structured in a semantic hierarchy so that you can take business A and business B, publish them to an upper level, to a higher level, and I can browse both businesses knowledgeably. We do this all the time with our clients. We take 12 companies that are totally unrelated and we transmit their unified namespaces to one broker. So what I've got is enterprise, and then we can navigate those businesses. And this is how we were able to take a chemical company that makes ink, a company that prints, and a company that makes sugar water, and connect all three of them together and share the data between them without having to build individual services for each function. It's just built into the architecture, right? And we talk about scalability and time to value and all those things, all right? Okay, so you can do what's in that blog post to do this piece right here. Connect, collect, store, analyze, and visualize. But at the end of this step, you will create technical debt for the rest, the remaining part. You have to have a semantic hierarchy. As part of your minimum technical requirements, you must have a semantic hierarchy. Otherwise, it is not unified namespace. And anyone who says it's unified namespace, they're not telling you the truth, okay? All right, so the find patterns, predict, report, and solve. We've talked about this a million times. Machine learning. Why did that client fail in machine learning? Well, the answer is because they didn't connect, collect, store, and store in a way that structured and normalized data. Okay, so we call this the scrubbing in machine learning. In a way that's structured and normalized. Then what we couldn't do was find patterns across assets, predict, report, and solve. The unified namespace is designed to solve that problem. Okay? All right. That is the blog post there. Again, from a technical perspective, I like it. I feel bad actually shooting this, but this one is even more irresponsible than the first one. From just a purely, hey, is this how you do the ignition part? Yes, absolutely. But all the pieces here, how to set up a transmitter engine, everything looks right to me. How to connect to clarify, all of that seems right, okay? But this is not if the argument here is no one shows you how to implement a unified namespace, this is not a how to implement a unified namespace. This is not a unified namespace, okay? All right. With that, let's go here. All right. So let's start with, I'm going to talk about this SAP thing, and then we'll call it. We're at 49 minutes here. So I published a LinkedIn post. I'm going to be shooting a private video for, basically SAP is saying UNS doesn't scale, okay? And obviously they're trying to sell OT solutions. And this happens in the sales process, right? So I'm going to be shooting a private video today for members of Mastermind to talk about the enterprise scalability with UNS. A member reached out and asked us to help counter some things SAP salespeople have been telling clients about UNS scalability. As most of you know, SAP has been pushing toward the plant floor in MES and CMMS solutions, and their growth has been very slow. That's because they approach OT problems with an IT mindset, and it should be the other way around. Start with the problem and work your way back to the solution instead of starting with the tech and finding a market for it. We leverage what SAP is good at. SAP is very good at master data model. We actually use SAP's master data model for the semantic hierarchy. That way we can line up ERP transactions. We can also line up ERP modules with OT data, which is one of the biggest challenges you have in digital transformation. You can take the semantic hierarchy that's used in SAP, which is always invariably ISA 95 Part 2, which is the reason we use it. Most ERPs organize businesses this way. We take that master data model and we map it to OT data in the unified namespace. That blog post we just read, there's no mechanism for that. Okay, there isn't a mechanism to do that. Moreover, you created technical debt when you want to connect the two together. Okay, because you're not using the same semantic hierarchy so that I can just drop an SAP namespace in the location in the semantic hierarchy that lines right up with the asset that the PLC is on. What you did was you created controls, PLCs, and then a list of PLCs. But that isn't how the business software operates. The business software doesn't look at assets, doesn't look at the technology on assets as being grouped by the technology. They look at it as being grouped by the asset. And that's how the business operates. At the end of the day, if you want to do IT-OT convergence, you better take the IT part into consideration, okay? We use SAP for master data model, general ledger, bill of materials, and we integrate their solution into a unified namespace via business connectors. We map their BAPI to the UNS via an SAP namespace, and then we reference SAP tags to namespace topics. Where you normally leverage a message queue, we create a namespace for each message type. So if I have a queue for a specific SAP transaction, what we do is we create a namespace for there's always some asset ID on that transaction. This is a license tag in SAP for this specific asset. This is the license tag for this asset ID in SAP. And there's a message queue where we're sending messages back and forth between OT, operational technology, where we're doing the manufacturing, and IT, the information technology, where we're storing everything to understand how the business is doing. You have to connect the two together. If you don't create a semantic hierarchy that can be understood, where I can somehow map, this would be like creating a database where there's no relationship between this entity, this table, the columns in this table. There's no relationship between this table and this table. And what I wanted to do is come up with some type of join so that I could say that I could create some ad hoc relationship between the two. That's what's being proposed here. Okay? There has to be a mechanism. It's just like in CMMSs, right? You have an ERP system and you got a CMMS. I may have an asset that's in the ERP, the same asset. I got a machine that's called an asset. It's in an ERP, and I got a machine that's an asset. It's in the CMMS. And let's say the CMMS is a standalone piece of software, and so is the ERP. There is an asset ID for that one asset. You got one asset that's got two completely different IDs in two different pieces of software. Now, let's say what I wanted to do was I wanted to join the work order and the bill of materials, which is managed in the ERP, with all of the maintenance work orders that are managed in the CMMS for one asset. What's the first thing I have to do? I have to create an integration that joins together the two separate asset IDs. Or what I could do is put something in the middle where what I do is I take CMMS. I want you to grab the asset from this hierarchy, which is using ISA 95. I want you to use this asset ID from this hierarchy using ISA 95. And I want you to publish based on ISA 95 into this namespace where we've organized all the OT data. Okay? Semantic hierarchy fucking matters. Okay? It's not a naming convention. Semantic hierarchy matters. And if you approach Unified Namespace without focusing on semantic hierarchy, you're wasting your time. Please don't do that. Okay? All right. That's all I wanted to read on this piece. Anyway, if you want to see this slide, I created a slide that just shows the examples of what a Unified Namespace looks like. Okay, and a couple of different examples. There was actually, this slide's a really good one here, which was posted by Mark Jackie, and then someone asked, hey, can you take this reference architecture that they created and explain what the unified namespace would look like based on how the levels in the business are structured? And so I did that. All right, let's look at this one. Jeff Winter, by the way, Jeff did I love Winter's post here on digital transformation. He basically says, organizations can't digitally transform if they're not all using the same definition. What I wanted to do was read the definitions we use, okay? So the non-technical definition of digital transformation is digital transformation is the process of going from an organization that has automated industrial processes and manual business decisions to an organization that leverages data created from automated industrial processes to automate business decisions. And the technical definitions for the technical person: digital transformation is the process of going from an organization that relies on latent experiential decision-making, driven by manual business processes at the MES layer, to an organization focused on data-driven decision-making via automated business processes. Digital strategy, digital architecture, and common technology drive this transformation. Digital transformation is about leveraging technology to find patterns in data we cannot see with the naked eye, to solve business and process problems on a common infrastructure in service of exponentially increasing the collective knowledge of the organization. Great post, Jeff. Again, this is where this component comes in. If you go to that blog post and you build your unified namespace, that is the structure of the namespace, the way they're suggesting, you have created technical debt. If you limit that blog post to just building a UNS on an asset and nothing else, then you can just take that asset namespace and publish it into a semantic hierarchy. And because the asset is the lowest level of the semantic hierarchy, okay, so it's either a cell or a production line, that is the lowest level of the semantic hierarchy. You can always publish it up one level and create the hierarchy. But the moment you're above the asset level, where now what I've got is a group of assets together, what I've done is lost the abstraction or the detail of the various assets by using that structure. Okay? But if you don't get that part right, you can't do this part. You can't find patterns in the data. You can't predict, you can't report, you can't solve without manually doing what it is data scientists do right now, which is they spend 75%. The reason our client failed in their ML initiative is because they ended up in the same corner everyone else ends up in. Their data scientists spend 75 to 80% of their time, A, accessing their data, and then B, scrubbing their data, and then C, structuring it for normalization. That is, how do I compare a sensor value, the value of a sensor to a business outcome? The first thing I have to do is I have to structure the data in a way where there's a relationship between the value of the sensor and the business outcome. That's part of what UNS does. It's one of the major functions of a unified namespace. Okay? Normalization, that is getting a one-to-one, there's one value for every value. Okay, so for every OEE for every sensor change, I have an OEE calculation for it. Why? Because OEE may change once every 2 minutes. The sensor may change 50 times every second, but they're next to each other. So let's say for my machine learning algorithm, what I want to do is I want one value for every second of each. Well, what I do is I just create a trigger that grabs one for each. They're right next to each other. When the sensor changes, grab the OEE, insert it into the back end. Sensor changes, grab the OEE, and put it in the back end. Okay, you just create a business workflow, okay, to do that. But if I don't have them structured in a way where there's a relationship between the OEE value and the sensor value, then how do I do that? Moreover, how do I automate that so that that relationship's always the same? So no matter where I go in the enterprise, I know how to find the relationship between this sensor value and this OEE calculation, or enter in whatever KPI. That's a business outcome, okay? Very, very important point. Last piece. All right, Mark Jackal, he just did this. This is the guy who published the reference architecture. Great post. You should look this one up. Talks about there's no one-size-fits-all IIoT reference architecture. And what my whole point was, unified namespace is the one-size-fits-all part. All right, let me say this piece. That'll be my last, unless there's some, egregious, I'm not gonna do any more reaction videos on Corso blog posts. Okay, I did this one because, again, I got inundated today, 100 messages on, hey, this is the post. Can you comment on this? At the end of the day, what they are describing is not unified namespace. Okay, there are very specific elements of a unified namespace. Okay, there are very specific elements, not the least of which are functional, informative, and definitional namespaces, okay, which this right here, this piece right here is designed, if I look at this broker at this location, it is organized in a semantic hierarchy in the same way that this location is organized. And if I go down to the area within my, so if you're looking at what Corso put in their blog, Corso put in their blog at best would be supervisory control and data acquisition at the cell or asset level. But it's missing all the, this is unified namespace. It is the structure of the business and all of the events. There's no structure of the business there. I mean, I can't explain it any better. There is no structure of the business. So when I say unified namespace, imagine a file share where all you have to do is teach someone the semantic hierarchy and they can find any data point they're looking for. That's missing in their blog post. Therefore, it is not unified namespace. Moreover, they keep calling it a naming convention. Okay? It is not a naming convention. It is a semantic hierarchy. Naming conventions have nothing to do with hierarchy. Naming convention is, what do I call the tag? Okay? You need a semantic hierarchy to build a unified namespace. Full stop. You have to. It doesn't work if you don't. Moreover, you can't do this part. You have to be able to structure the business. Okay? And then you treat all of these layers as nodes. So there is a MES node, functional namespace. There is ERP node, functional namespace. You have visualizations for MES, informative namespace. You have definitions for this area, definitional namespace. And then you have ad hoc namespaces. Maybe somebody wants to create an ad hoc relationship out on the edge. Some controls engineer wants to create a quick dashboard that's going to show the relationship from value X and value Y because we're having some recurring issue on some sensor. And it's a temporary ad hoc namespace. Boom. That's what you do. But what's being put in these blog posts are not unified namespace. I can't say it any clearer. Okay? It's just not. All right? And I have reached out to Corso and offered them to come on the podcast. And I have given them professional courtesy saying, hey, I'm commenting on this. And they're intentionally not responding. Okay? So at this point, I either have to say nothing about it or I have to respond, okay? Because all the work that we've put into communicating to the world how to successfully digitally transform via a unified namespace, we can't allow people to go out and misuse the term, okay? We can't do that. We can't do that. Now, if you want to ask the question, why is it Corso hasn't responded? Why do you think? I have no idea. If I'm being honest with you, the CEO of Corso and I have spoken a handful of times, and it was cordial. There was no negative. We emailed a couple times, and we talked on the phone a couple of times. Outside of that, there's nothing. I couldn't tell you why. But let me say one time, Jeff Rankinen suggested we give Corso Systems a free seat on Mastermind. I'd have to have a values conversation with Corso in order to offer that. But I will say this will be the last. This is going to be the last reaction video on this subject. What I would say is going forward, unless I say otherwise, unless I communicate otherwise publicly, what they're putting in their blog post is not something I would endorse as unified namespace, and it's certainly not how I architected it. All right. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment down on the video below whether this is helpful. Okay. At the end of the day, there's this general rule. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. I always believed that was a way of, telling I always believed that was a way of controlling people's speech. One of the things I've learned in my career as I moved up the chain, people didn't get more polite; they got more real. So the higher I went, the closer I got to the boardroom, and once I was in the boardroom, people get real. And the reason they get real is because they're trying to solve the actual problems. And what I discovered was when they create these culture rules about, you know, only say nice things and be nice and be polite and all that stuff, it's just a way of getting them for you not to be critical. That's it. I mean, and at the end of the day, I have all the professional respect for Corso and obviously whoever wrote that. But if they continue to misrepresent what a unified namespace is, I don't have any choice but to respond to it. Okay, at the end of the day. So from this moment going forward, unless I say something otherwise, just, you know, if you're part of our community and their blog posts are confusing you, please ignore the blog posts. And you know, please ignore them because they're not representative. If your goal is the holy grail in manufacturing, you're not going to achieve it following those blog posts. I promise you. Okay? Thank you.